You don't own the brand. Coca-Cola found out when they did New Coke. You don't tell customers what to buy, and you don't change something that they love without their permission. When you are telling the story of your brand, in fact, it is kind of, you need to be telling a love letter to your customers. That is, you have to geek out on the same stuff they geek out on. You've got to have that in common.
In this episode, you'll meet the founder of StoryFire, Neal Foard. Learn how narratives can transform your communication skills and make a profound impact on human connection and business. Please welcome Neal Foard to the RebelRebel Podcast.
This episode is brought to you by the Redline Report by Brand Jitsu. What story is your website telling, and how is it telling it? Are you just talking about yourself, or are you connecting with your customers on a more meaningful level? Find out at brandjitsu.com/redline. If you feel so inclined, you can support the show by like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your favorite podcast. Also, you can go to patreon.com/RebelRebelPod. The Rebel Rebel is a show dedicated to creative rebels and entrepreneurs all over the world. It's for those people who think audaciously and act courageously in service of making the world a better and more interesting place. Welcome to the Rebel Rebel. I'm your host, Michael Dargie, and way down south, so far down south, I've got Neal Foard. And did I pronounce that right? I didn't even ask before we started.
Yep. It's spelled Foard, but it's Ford. F-O-A-R-D.
I assumed it was Ford, but you never know. You never know. Anyway, thank you so much for coming on the show, Neal. You caught my attention on LinkedIn, and I just knew I had to talk to you.
That's awesome. It's funny. LinkedIn is its own ecosystem. It's actually my favorite of all of the social media sites. It's the one least prone to bots and trolls, and because I guess they don't do business.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I've really enjoyed, and I'm not even sure where I first saw you, but you're one of your videos talking about story, and I'm just like, just the way that you approach the world, and your StoryFire is so cool. And so I want to talk all about that. I'm super thrilled to have you on the show. And what I'd like to do is maybe, nice. And where do we go to storyfire.net to pick up a mug? Or is that?
Yeah, the mugs aren't for sale yet. But storyfire.net is where I have my storytelling course. It's an 18 module, soon to be 25 module video course that also includes exercises. I'm quite proud of it. I hold as my competition all of the the masterclass videos and so on, and I tried to be a lot more in depth than they are. And what I can tell you is that I consider, from a long career, I spent 30 years in advertising, and over that long career, what I learned more than anything is that the most timeless skill you can have in any field is the ability to communicate ideas clearly. And we, as human beings, absorb information from narrative, from stories. It goes back, 30,000 years and beyond, where we were all sitting around a fire talking about, why does it snow? And what is the purpose of a volcano? And do you think that we'll kill the bison tomorrow? It's hardwired into human beings. It's our operating system. It's also the thing that makes us so dangerous, because when you can imagine something, you can make it true. Did you know that Jules Verne was writing about space travel before the Wright brothers were born? So you don't bring these ideas into reality until you see them as fiction. And so far as we know, we are unique in the animal kingdom in the ability to imagine the future, picture the past, and from our imaginations, conjure full realities. And my game, my profession, is helping people get much, much better at telling quicker, clearer, more entertaining stories for business and real life.
Oh my God. I love that. You made me, as you're talking about Jules Verne, you made me think about Gene Roddenberry and, the communicator.
Yeah. Which is the iPhone, basically. Yeah.
I know. Even the Motorola flip phone back in the day.
Yeah. It is quite amazing.
So
the Star Trek prescience. Keep going. Sorry.
Oh yeah. It's It's wild. And even think about the Acura logo. Looks an awful lot like the Star Trek logo, but I digress.
Yeah, our Space Force logo takes its code.
If we could go back in time.
Star Trek.
Yeah, totally. I'm just going to address this because I'm not sure whether I'm going to need to address this in the edit or not, but the delay is quite significant. Are you feeling the same way?
Yeah, unfortunately.
Would you like to reschedule this? I don't want to lose you.
No, I'm fine. We'll just deal with it. I'm fine.
I think this...
I'm going to pull out my my good luck moose that you see in Calgary, and I'm going to... come on, help us out here.
Come on, Moose. I'm a company member at a Loose Moose Theater Company here in Calgary, which is one of the founding places of improv in the world, which is kind of cool. It's nice.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
You Canadians.
Yeah, we do some stuff. So if I could go back in time, actually, if I could take you back in time, Neal, what is it that got you interested in telling stories? And I guess helping businesses tell better stories. And I know you're advertising, but does it happen before then?
I suppose. I mean, I come from the age before VCRs and before DVRs. And so if you wanted to watch Saturday Night Live back when I was a kid, you had to stay up late on Saturday night. And who watched to the end? Almost nobody. And it was sort of the agreement in my family when I was a very young kid that nobody would stay up to watch Saturday Night Live. I'd just tell them what happened on Sunday morning. And so I developed a kind of knack for being able to replay all the skits, even to the point, Michael, where I would literally write down what the ideas were. Like, in this one, John Belushi was a bee, and they were with the killer bees. And literally Sunday morning was a kind of theatrical, the show was every Sunday morning where I would relive the Saturday Night Live. And I remember the nicest compliment I ever got was from my sister Lily, who one day saw a recording of one of the Saturday Night Live skits. And she said, it was funnier when you did it. And I thought, okay. So, anywho, but that was where it started. And what I discovered was I went into advertising as a career after having left the lumber business. And I was perhaps ill-trained to be an advertising copywriter, but I managed to finagle my way into the industry. And what I discovered was I was surrounded by people who were vastly more creative than I was. And in order to remain competitive, I exploited that skill at being able to explain ideas as the thing I could bring to the party. And, it was a competitive advantage to be able to go into a room and make something sound funnier than it was, or perhaps, put just the right emphasis on it so that they would understand the business rationale for the idea. And over the course of 30 years, that was sort of my stock in trade, was I would wind up presenting, as a creative director, presenting other people's ideas for the purpose of having clients accept them, and likewise winning new business by being able to seem more compelling than your competitors.
Right. Well, of all the time that you've spent doing that, are there any sort of lessons along the way in terms of, mining for that nugget or the through line? Yeah.
Oh boy, are there ever. And that's what the StoryFire course is chock full of. But I will tell you that
the link will be in the show notes.
Yeah. God bless you. God bless you, Michael. I'll tell you the main thing that I discovered is that a truly great presenter is often a very good listener, because the best presentations are conversations. And when you are sensitive to your audience, then you are there. The very purpose of your standing up and speaking is not so much to make a sale as it is to help. It's quite easy to tell it with an empathy and an aspect that makes it easier to buy. And I also find, and this was a discovery that sort of landed on me happily, is that if you go in exclusively with an orientation not to make a sale, but just to help, it turns out it overcomes a lot of stage fright. because you're no longer in your own head. You're too focused on them and whether this is working and whether this is what they need. And the number of times that I have discovered, I've been in the middle of a very, very high-powered pitch, and I could just read it on their faces. This is not working. I'm saying something and they're just not feeling it. And I've stopped in the middle and literally said, Ron, I'm looking at your face and I can tell this is not what you were hoping to hear. Would you mind if I just stopped here and ask you, where am I going wrong? Where have I taken the wrong exit? And people are sort of startled and impressed that you're paying enough attention to make it a conversation and not a sales pitch. And I would say in about half of those times, I was able to recover sufficiently by saying, oh, I'm so sorry. I did not understand that. Let me go then off into that tack so that my answer is more to what you were here for. That kind of empathy and understanding. You know, Michael, you've probably heard this phrase, how you do anything is how you do everything. And what it means is that when someone talks about somebody else behind their back, or they spout a falsehood, you think, well, they probably talk about me behind my back. Or a brand will do a particularly delicious job on the design of the car, and you're thinking, well, the mechanics must be brilliant. Well, I wouldn't make that assumption, but people do. They do. They think that when they look at a Clydesdale, they see all that muscle on the hoof, and they think, well, they must be fast. No. The signal of how you do anything is how you do everything is why actors seem to get credit for the roles they play. Like, I got news for you. You know, Arnold Schwarzenegger was not the Terminator. They wrote every word he said. They dressed him. They did his makeup. They put him in a certain spot. They gave him 19 takes to get it right. The editor took only the best takes. And you think he's the Terminator? There were 700 people making him the Terminator. Well, this point of mine, which is that how you do anything is how you do everything. When you actually demonstrate empathy and understanding and a desire to help to the audience, how you do anything is how you do everything. They just assume you are paying that much attention in everything else you do, that you are sensitive to input. Right. And I can tell you one of the nicest compliments I ever got from a client wasn't that he respected my creative work. It's that he said, you listen to me. And I thought, you know what? I'll take that. I'll take it. Because he's getting what he wants. Magic. He wants somebody to listen.
Yeah, interesting. That is so cool.
I've got a ton more, by the way, Michael, in case you want me to go on. So anytime you want me to keep going, I will.
Oh my God, do I ever?
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. We were talking ever so briefly about Loose Moose Theater, which is an improv theater here in Calgary. And one of the things I've learned there from, Loose Moose, from all the people there, not just Keith Johnstone and Dennis Cahill and the creative directors there, the artistic directors, but the actors that you work on stage with, is that it's about them. It's not about you. So if you go on stage and you listen to their offers, and then, you offer something back and they listen to your offer and then offer something, it becomes this beautiful thing. It becomes an important thing, an important bit of theater. And I've often found that marketing and advertising should be the same way. So I'm really thrilled to hear you say that.
That's a brilliant observation. Improv. Well, I'll tell you, one of the main things is that people often underestimate the value of the first 15, 30 seconds. Have you noticed that when people get up, especially at business meetings or especially during a pitch, they'll stand on stage and they'll say things like, well, it's so nice of you to have us. So, we're so excited to be here. And they're blowing the most expensive real estate, that beachfront house, when in the first 10 seconds, they could have said something like, okay, question, what do serial killers and football coaches have in common? Or they get up and they say something like, I am about to absolutely make your day. By the way, I was sitting on jury service, and I'm in this jury, and up gets the defense attorney. And these were the first words out of his mouth. Wow, are you going to love me? Because I'm going to make this so easy that when you go into the jury box and you finally render your verdict, it's going to take you less than 10 minutes because I can prove definitively that there is only one verdict to return. I'll get into the detail, but in the meantime, you're welcome. Okay, I'm not kidding. Michael, wow. He did that. And the whole, now here was the impact of that. It's like whatever, the prosecution can say whatever they're going to say, but we want to go into the jury box and only take 10 minutes. So everything we're thinking after there is he right about that? I hope he's right about that. You know, we're automatically biased in his favor. He took the first 15 seconds and gave his client a 30% better shot at an acquittal. So, but if he gets up and he says, "Nice to see you. Thank you so much for your service. It's very nice to see you, ladies and gentlemen." Blah, blah, blah. No.
How's everybody feeling today?
Right. And that's a mistake. And the great stand-up comedians will walk up and they will just be funny right out the gate. And I've seen Bill Burr do it. I've seen Eddie Pepitone do it. Pepitone's really good at that. He gets up on stage and just launches into the first joke, and it's just it explodes. But anyway, in order to take advantage of that first 30 seconds when you are storytelling, it's often good to have something that startles, or that's a contradiction to how you feel, or that's contrapuntal to your aspect. And I will also say that, and like sometimes it's a question, like, okay, I'd like to take a very quick poll as the very first thing I do. I want to see, show of hands, everybody who agrees that, you know, and then you launch some crazy question at them. And one of the first things I used to do, which was very good beginning, and I should probably go back to it, is I would make sure that the audience all had pieces of paper and pens. And I would walk out and I would say, "I'm going to give you 30 seconds to perform a task. Your job, when I start my stopwatch, is to pick up your pen and draw a portrait of the person sitting next to you. Ready? Go." Okay, so for the next 30 seconds, they're like, and they're scrambling to draw pictures of each other. And then at the end of the 30 seconds, I say, "Okay, now everybody," and it's very difficult, by the way, it's very difficult to get their attention back, but that's okay. And then I'll say, "All right, everybody, pens down now. Show your portrait to the other person." Okay. And then the room explodes again. And the reason I do that is to point out that, because I will say, and this was an old thing that they used to do at the Stanford Design School, is they would do this exercise because the most common word that people would say when they showed each other the portraits that they'd drawn is sorry. And why that's important is, you didn't walk in here with the expectation you were going to be a great artist. You have nothing to apologize for. Like, I didn't make it a criterion of your showing up today that you had to be, any more than I said, "All right, everybody put on your ice skates, and now I'm going to have you all race across the ice." There's no reason for you to apologize. You didn't know this was a requirement. But what's more, but why that's important is we fear the judgment of our peers, and it often keeps us from taking risks because we don't want to look foolish. Today, you are not to operate with that fear. You are not being judged today. So let's get started. And with that armament, it preps them. That first 30 seconds has made a real impact on them. They feel like today's going to be a dynamic session. It's going to involve us. It's going to be fun. It's going to be funny. And it's going to have a point to it. And I could have gotten up and I could have reviewed an agenda slide that said all that. We're going to do some exercises, and we're going to... Michael, have you ever seen this? People say, "We're so excited to be here. Thank you for having us." All right, now, they don't realize that actually surrenders status, because what you're really doing is you're cringing in front of the person that you're talking to, and you're saying, "Thank you for allowing us into your presence, Your Highness." So, like, it doesn't fill me with enthusiasm for two reasons. The first is everybody says that. It's just such a cliche. Everybody says it. The second thing is you're not really excited. If you were excited, you would have come in here and said, "Let's get started. Let's talk about this thing. I'm going to save you $10,000 a second for the next minute and a half. Show of hands. Who wants that money? Anybody? Okay. All the hands go up. Good. You're paying attention. All right. That kind of beginning, that electrifying beginning, and it doesn't have to be electrifying. It just has to be interesting. That's why, by the way, and I know you know this, that's why stories are so effective. Because, as my friend Rene Rodriguez would say, Rene is a brilliant teacher of how to be more persuasive and how to influence people. What he would say is that when you get in there and you offer somebody, a chance to have you do the imagining for them. Well, the way he puts it is like this. He goes, do you know we spend about 90% of our time daydreaming? Even when we're in a meeting, we're daydreaming. We're thinking about, oh, gee, I wonder if this is going to work for me. How could I use this? I wonder if did I leave the oven on? It's that kind of thing, right? People are daydreaming. When you tell a story, they're still daydreaming, but you're the one doing it for them. They're daydreaming your script. Because as you're sitting there and I say, okay, I'm at a minor league ballpark. My little 6.5-year-old girl is with me. I take her to the minor league games because she doesn't know the difference between Yankees baseball and New Jersey Jackals baseball, right? And every seat is close to the action, and it was only $8 a ticket, and the hot dogs are $1, and beers are $1.25. Yeah. So naturally, my little girl's sitting next to me at the minor league game. As I tell that story, you're there with me. You have not checked out. You're 100% there with me. I believe that part of the fascination of improv is that it actually has probably the highest audience focus of any audience. You know how easy it is to check out in an opera or a concert. Even music you've heard before. It's you can sort of check out like, oh, geez, are we going to hear another guitar-based? Okay, fine. It's The Who. It's 19 songs all at 125 decibels. Okay, but when you are watching improv, they're on a tightrope 600 feet over the Grand Canyon. You are riveted to see if it's going to work. And then when it does, it's like watching a magic trick. Yeah,
absolutely. And then when it doesn't, also like watching a magic trick.
Yeah, it doesn't always work. They're not all gems, but that's what makes the triumph so spectacular. And but anyway, so I just wanted to go back to, for the purposes of your audience and when it comes to storytelling, is that people underestimate the value of the first minute. And if you can seize people's attention and pay them the compliment of just starting in, they'll give you license to hold their attention for another 10 minutes. If you can hold it for 1, they'll give you 10. And how you do anything is how you do everything. They assume that you are that dynamic and that action-filled for the rest of the day.
I love it. Have you? There's an old writing adage, and I think this comes from writing television, actually, to come into a scene late and leave early.
I never heard that. That's awesome. It makes sense, though. Yeah. Leave before the end of the Saturday Night Live skit, because generally speaking, they don't have endings.
Yeah, I think it's more like we don't need to know how you got there. We just need to get in while the action is happening. And
I think so.
When we get that resolution, when we get that synthesis,
You are so right. Especially when you are pitching something. Like, let's pretend that you and I have an advertising agency and we're trying to get the business of Johnson & Johnson. And we walk into the meeting, and for the first 15 minutes, we're talking about who we are and what we do. Like our values, and here are our people. What a boner. No, what you need to do is walk in there and start talking immediately about Johnson & Johnson's situation and what you've observed and the insight that you've had and what you believe that the implications of that are. They can read about you on LinkedIn or Facebook, or they probably Googled you before you got there anyway. Do I really have to tell you that we have 19 other clients in the automotive accessory space, or pharma? No. All they're interested in is what are you thinking? Like, what insight can you bring me that I didn't already have? And trust me, most of them have every insight you walked in with. So you got to just get right to that. Don't bore me with how excited you are to be here.
Talk to me about contrast.
Well, let's see. Let me make sure I understand what you mean. How do you mean contrast?
I'm thinking about contrast in story, and I've sort of got this belief that contrast is what makes things interesting. It's what makes if you look at drawings like shadow and light are, that's some contrasting stuff. But with story, I think it's the same way. And sometimes it's coming into a really dark story with a bright energy. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, is there stuff to mine there?
The way I would put it, I understand what you mean. The way I put it is conflict. What's the conflict? And so what is the dynamic tension of forces who are in opposition here? So let's say, for example, that, you see a little baby doe, a little deer out in a field, and then you see this ravenous wolf just at the tree line. All right, so we're already under tension. Now you see a young Native American boy with a knife. Okay, this introduces more tension, and what's happening is that the rubber band is being pulled, and you and I both know that the editor or the director is going to seek just the right amount of tension before the wolf emerges from the tree line, and the little boy is. He's on it. And this, in any story, it has to contain some conflict. And the great trick to stories that have a twist is that oftentimes the conflict isn't what you thought it was. So, for example, you think that being stranded at the side of the road is the conflict. But in fact, it's the group of young men in the pickup truck that come by to help. That's your real problem. Or it turns out they're perfectly nice. It's the country sheriff who's the real conflict. And I had this one story that I dearly love to tell because every word of it's true, which was that my own car was crapped out. It was back when I had no money. I had a 66 Mustang and had no hood on the engine. And I'm astonished they let me drive it around. But whenever it would rain or even lightly mist, the car wouldn't start because all of the electrics got screwed up by the moisture. So one morning I go out there and apparently it's caused some kind of short that's drained my battery and I can't move. And I think the starter or maybe the alternator's gone. So I'm calling around for help. This was way before cell phones. And so I had to use a phone book to find Balkan Auto Repair Garage Business. They're the only ones that would offer to tow me in for nothing. And the reason they offered to tow me in for nothing was because I'll send my father. This 90-year-old guy whom I'm pretty sure was new to tow trucks shows up. And I think his tow truck was missing some parts. And he is having trouble hooking my car up. And so I had to kind of pitch in and help him. And that mangled my suit, my one suit. And it got it all grease stained. And normally it would have sent me into an absolute rage. But he was so sunny of demeanor. He had this big head of brilliant snow cone white hair. And he was just chipper. And he kept laughing at me going, "Look, old car, young man." Ha, ha, ha. And so we're riding along in his tow truck, bouncing along to some bouzouki music. And he's trying to get me to dance with him, doing this Balkan, whatever. We roll into the shop. 4 generations of his family go to work on the car. And the only person in the family that doesn't have that same upbeat demeanor is this woman with a toothpick behind the counter who clearly runs the place. And she has approximately the same sense of humor as Genghis Khan. And the toothpick goes back and forth depending on whether she likes you or doesn't like you. And for me, it went to the left side, which means she doesn't like me. She thinks I'm there to rob the place. So, I'm telling her every joke I can think of to try to get her to laugh. And I'm turning, staplers into puppets and just doing anything I can. It's just not working at all, Michael. Not at all. This gal is unreachable. Finally, the car gets fixed and they've done a beautiful job and they steam cleaned the engine bay. I mean, I didn't ask them to. It's just beautiful. And I'm thinking, oh boy, that looks fantastic. And she says to me, "By the way, it cost more than we told you it would." And I'm like, oh no, here it comes. They lured me in with the free tow. They told me it was going to be $90. And she said, "It's $94. And I went, "Oh, okay, All right. So just as I whip out my checkbook, because as I said, this was back before cell phones, I whip out my checkbook. I'm looking for who this is supposed to be made out to. And behind her, for the first time I'm noticing this, is a 4-foot by 8-foot sign that says no checks. So I stare into her humorless eyes, the executioner's eyes, and I'm going, uh-oh, what am I going to do now? And just then the old guy with the big white hair comes in, holding an infant, a little baby with an identical head of hair, just jet black. And I look at the baby, and the baby looks at me, and we lock eyes, and the baby goes, go! And then he just squeals in delight, staring at me. And the old guy, who was smiling a minute ago, suddenly gets very intense, and he goes, oh, he knows you from before in the other life. And the woman behind the counter goes, well, if he knows you, a check's okay. So that was now I tell you that story for the contrast, or in this case, the conflict, which was it was a series of bad things with silver linings. Oh, and I'm leaving out one of my favorite parts of the story, Michael, which was, she says to me, we close at noon. And I'm thinking, oh, well, I need to skedaddle and get out through the fence before they close it. She goes, we're all going to go back and eat in the back. You want to join us? And I'm like, fantastic. Fantastic. So I had their goat pastries, which were absolutely delicious, and some kind of weird Turkish coffee that was, to this day, I'm still vibrating off of that caffeine. But to go back to, like I say, the contrast and the conflict, every time something bad happened, something good happened. And it had gotten to the point where I was almost expecting something good to happen. And for maybe the last month, I'm trying to adopt that. Like, even when something is really bad, maybe this is good. Just wait a couple of minutes and see if maybe this isn't a bad thing. You know how that goes? You're going, oh, damn, my shoe's untied. Then you bend down to tie it and a bullet whizzes over your head, or you're almost hit by a safe.
Every day.
Yeah. Anyway, so if I could use that story as a kind of an instruction for storytelling, I just want to take a step back and say that I only told that story because it was apropos to the situation. It was the story that I thought would represent a good kind of contrast between a minute ago it was a disaster, now it's a good thing. Now it's a disaster again, now it's a good thing. And no story should be told unless you can have a moral at the end of it that's relevant and revealing to the room. So if you are, oftentimes what people will do is they will, I'm sorry, go ahead, Mike.
No, I was just going to say we froze up a little bit, but I think we're back.
Oh. I was going to say that I'd like to say that when a lot of people go into a room, they don't have in mind the kind of end game about what's the resolution of this story, what moral does it teach, what lesson does it reveal, what can we both, from this tale, what can we both agree on? And by the way, I do consider that one of the best uses of story is that it helps you achieve a kind of simpatico over at least one point, because you know how we are now. Everything's so freaking divided, and stories have a wonderful way of sort of bringing us together. I noticed that of the followers that I have on TikTok, they all think I am the same politics as them, and it's across the spectrum, and that's a very deliberate illusion that I will not burst. It does demonstrate to me that we all really fall within one standard deviation of each other, that the only reason that we seem so divided is because there are forces, there are algorithms, there are tech people, there are whole companies and networks whose job seems like it's to divide us, to make us filled with rage and fear. And a story has a wonderful way of overcoming that, because it temporarily you're not thinking about those things. As I said before, we're daydreaming together.
Yeah. I mean, you've clearly traveled, so that, I mean, one thing that I've noticed when I've traveled is that we're all very similar. We can sit down and have, and again, share a story, share a pint, share a coffee, share a story about something, and it doesn't matter where you are in the world. We all have that very same connection, and it's fascinating to me that's the language. And like you said, it's like kind of the DNA of it all.
And if I could add something to that as a kind of caution for anybody that in your audience when it comes to storytelling, is never make yourself the hero of your tale. And there's a very, very good reason for that. There's a quote from, I often say this, so people get tired of hearing it from me, but there's a great quote from George Orwell, the author of 1984. And he said, "No autobiography is to be trusted unless it reveals something disgraceful. Because any man who gives a good account of himself is probably lying, since any life when looked at from the inside is really just a series of defeats." And I completely agree with that assessment. So when you tell a story and the moral is that you're awesome, two things happen. The first is, I don't believe you. And second, I don't like you.
Yeah.
Don't ask that I stand here and look up at you with admiration. I mean, I would use stronger language, but I don't want to turn off people in your audience. But when instead of making yourself the hero of the tale, when you make yourself not the hero of the story, but rather if you are the center of the story, as I was in this car repair shop, I am nevertheless not the hero. The hero is the old man. The hero is the baby. And it's the old man infecting me with his positivity. Yes. And, in the end, she turned out to be a sweet woman who just was running a tough business. She's in the auto repair business. Of course, she's a hard nose, but, we're having lunch. You hungry? And so ultimately, how you were saying just a second ago, like you travel the world and you find out, man, we're kind of all the same animal. And we all just have different inputs and educations, and we've had different life experiences. And okay, you're this religion, I'm that religion. But in the end, you do have to say that if I tell a story for the purpose of standing next to you and observing this together, observing events together, I had this happen to me. I want you to pretend you were with me when this happened. Okay? You're not looking up at me. Okay. You and I are both standing out there and you're watching my suit get mangled. And you know what? Instead of flying into a rage, it was the old man who was my hero. And what happens if you practice this kind of religiously, if you try never to make yourself the hero of the story, what will happen to you is as events unwind in your own life, as you see them happen, you'll realize, you aren't the hero of this movie. You're you're making guest appearances in everybody else's tale. Are you going to be a good guest star, or are you going to be a bad one? And it doesn't take that much effort to be a really, really positive actor in somebody else's story. And my friend Matt O'Mara, who I have great admiration for, is a very successful guy. One of the things that he will do, he's fluent in Spanish. He speaks marvelous Spanish. And in Southern California, he would frequently run into Spanish-speaking people at venues. And he would always befriend anybody that spoke Spanish because he so liked to speak it. And because he would go out of his way to do that, he would make friends all over a site. We'd be on watching the LA Auto Show, and he would know everybody. He knows the security guy, he knows the cleaning crew and so forth. But he would always just go out of his way to get a smile and make people's lives better. And from him, I picked up, to be sensitive in any building or airline or restaurant. See if you can't improve the day of the people that are unseen. Or if not the ones that are unseen, try to make sure that anybody that's getting a hard time from another customer, that you wipe that clean with some kind of gesture. So if some woman is she can't stop complaining about how cold her, avocado is, then you can catch the waiter or waitress at the side and say, "Hey, listen, we're not all like that, okay? Don't worry about her. I'll leave a little extra in my tip to make up for her, okay?" So, and it's this mousse that I have here. This is something this is only one of the many toys I carry around with me, so that if I'm in a Starbucks, I'll leave it for the baristas, or if I'm in a restaurant, I'll leave it on the check. It doesn't take a whole lot of effort to go just a little bit out of your way so that people know that they were seen and that you appreciate that the public can be kind of rough to deal with. Boy, just knowing that somebody recognizes that can really improve the day of a server. When somebody goes, boy, I'm praying it's not all like that. Is it all like that? Mostly like that? Okay, well, I'll try to make it up for you.
That's amazing. I love your stories, and I love the morals of your story. And I have noticed that the stories that you offer so far all have a really nice moral to it. It always seems to be one of kindness and understanding, which I appreciate, Neal. I think and it's genuine. It's not one of those things where I feel it's a posture.
Yeah, you've heard of the phrase act of civil disobedience. The first time I ever heard the phrase, I read it as being disobedient, but being quite civil when you do it. It's like a bank robber that goes in, but he's really nice to everybody. And I reckon that in the current environment that we are in, with these rage channels, whether it's some guy grinding his axe on Facebook or some talking head, telling us how you should run in fear. You're surrounded by enemies and people are out to get you. And, that it's my act of civil disobedience to be the antidote voice, to be the voice that says, you know what, if you're on the highway and somebody cuts you off, just take an inventory of how many cars weren't loaded with a douchebag. And you know what you're going to find out? The ratio is 10,000 to 1. And 10,000 to 1, that's pretty good odds. That's pretty good. So
it's a very low douchebag ratio.
That's very low DB rating and DBR. And I just want to be that voice that says, I think in your soul that if you were to check out and if you were to not watch rage-inducing media for a week, your blood pressure would go down. You'd be sweeter to dogs and cats. You would find more beauty in the sun. And so may I suggest that don't listen to things that make you mad. Only listen to the voices that make you better.
That's amazing. I'm just going to sit with that one for a bit. If you're, it's so funny. Like I have a general format of where I like to go with this show, and it's kind of funny that we're here because I'd like to ask what's the one thing that you would like the world to know, but I think you've already said it. But
I do have a couple of things.
What's maybe the one story? Yeah, no, please.
There's one sentiment. There's one sentiment, most of all, that I want people to take to heart, and that is that you don't have to be alone. You've got to go into the world and remind people they're not alone. If your job isn't to fight your own loneliness, it's to cure somebody else's. And the loneliness is I think we're experiencing what's the word I'm looking for? It's an outbreak of loneliness, and it's very bad for the health. But loneliness also twists the psyche, and it makes us angry, and it makes it easy to flip out when we feel disrespected because we're in such pain. And it's sort of surprising that if you walk into the world with a kind of attitude of kindness, that I'm going to improve the day of the flight attendant, I'll do whatever I can to make her smile, that you will feel, I think that what's going to happen is you're going to radiate a kind of positivity that's attractive to other people. If you're nice to the person checking you into the hotel, if you are funny and rambunctious with the person cleaning up the health club, I think what you'll find is that it tends to attract a kind of positivity to you on a quantum level. I don't think it's not like The Secret, I don't mean it that way. I don't mean that it's the law of attraction in a kind of a mystical sense. I mean that your energy gets reflected. You reflect out into the world a kind of vibe. You certainly see it in people that have a lot of confidence. They walk into a room and you can see it. You can almost smell it. They appear confident. And nobody is more confident than somebody who is looking for a way to make somebody else's day. Like if I said, Michael, you and I are going to walk into this bar. All right, I'm going to give you, are you ready for this? I'm going to give you $50,000 if you can find somebody in this room who you can solve a problem for. I'm going to give you 10 minutes. Go. All right. You are walking in with a certain energy, a kind of urgency to try to help people. And, that's what we all kind of need to do, is we all need to walk around with a certain urgency to see if I can't find somebody whose day I can improve. And in my case, what I'm finding is that when I tell certain kinds of stories, they get a reaction. They get a lot of people go, wow, thank you for that. That was really, that was really sweet. And I'm glad I saw that. I will often get messages from people saying, I needed to hear that today. And that's not me being a star. That's me finding happiness. That's me addicted to crack, is to go out and try to get that reaction from people. By the way, I haven't shaped it into a story yet, but I'm going to. It may wind up, on the air in a couple days. I read about this matador in Madrid who was literally in the middle of a bullfight. And he looked into this bull's eyes and he thought, what am I doing? Oh, you've heard this. Have you heard this story? And he
I've
literally...
seen the picture.
Oh, yeah. And he goes over to the side of the bull ring and he just sits down and the bull kind of saunters over to him. And then he becomes a vegetarian.
Puts his hoof on his shoulder.
Well, almost. Yeah. Almost. And I'm thinking, and now what this matador is going through in that moment is the recognition that maybe the last 10 years of his life, he was the bad guy. And he's having this crisis of conscience. And, that when he goes into the world now, he is operating on a very, very different vibration. Let me ask you to give me your description of the attitude and the vibe of a matador walking into a bullfight ring. Tell me what he looks like to you. What's the vibe when a matador walks into a bullfight ring?
Oh, machismo, shoulders back, proud, arrogant.
Yeah, you're nailing it.
Unseeing, maybe.
He's arrogant, an egomaniac, in love with himself and his skill. Okay, now then contrast with that man sitting at the side of the bull ring going, oh my God, what have I been doing? This animal didn't want to fight me. Yeah. They literally had to
showed up on my arms.
Yeah. And they have to torment the animal into attacking me. The picadors go in there and they stab it. They stab it repeatedly until it's so furious it will kill anything that stands in front of it. And he decided he wasn't going to participate in that anymore. Well, the matador now goes into the world with a very different vibe. He's not arrogant. He doesn't walk around like a Conor McGregor, I'm the greatest thing ever, Oh, why don't you eat a giant bowl of steaming shut the fuck up? The matador to me is now he's an attitude of giving and kindness, and he's on a journey. This guy's on a journey. I never would have predicted in a million years it would be a matador that would have that kind of reaction. But then again, soldiers have done extraordinary things in battle where they've suddenly realized they've caught themselves in the middle of things and had a change of heart. In any case,
what the hell am I doing?
I don't know how much time we have, but if you like, I've got a couple more stories to tell.
Yeah, well, and let me ask you to, and this is not for a shameless plug, but I'd like to really get people hooked on your StoryFire.
Oh, excellent!
Because if people are not, if they're not in now,
yeah, well, I would hope.
I really, I just love what you do. Yeah.
Yeah. So
but I don't know if you want to shape it that way, but I mean, I could listen to your stories all day.
Yeah, no, I'll go ahead and I'll give myself a shameless plug, because I really do. I'm a great believer in this content that I put together. It's essentially 30 years of thousands and thousands of presentations distilled down into, for the moment, 18 videos, and it will. And if you buy the course, you get access to all the new videos that come in, and it's called StoryFire, and it's 18 modules. They're kind of bite-sized. They're usually less than 8 minutes long, although sometimes they're more. And what they teach is a very systematic attitude, approach, tips. So it's strategies, tactics, where to find stories, how to know, how to organize them, how to use them in a business context, and everything from how to do better PowerPoint to 3-act structure. And the thing that I'm proudest of, Michael, about it is it comes with exercises that you can do. And these are achievable exercises. These are things you can do right from the very get-go to start to get a better sense about how to tell your story and how to apply it. And it's basically the rudiments of this course that I have taken the trouble to record were all based in a management training program protocol that I put together when I was in advertising. So you're getting professional grade tips from somebody who used to make their living at it.
Nice. So just go to storyfire.net. How much is it, if you don't mind me asking?
I don't. It's $198, and I am told that is vastly underpriced.
What?
I'm told that by the guys that are.
I could.
It's
don't raise it until I buy
it. Yes, they can go there, but www.storyfire.net, and as I say, I will be adding more material, so it's even going to be more valuable. And then I'm going to have like live calls, and we'll have sort of chat rooms and stuff. And I have to confess that I'm one of these people that just likes the subject so much that I just as soon just have a lot of people doing it. So I wanted to make it kind of accessible. Right. And I am going to be, I'll be doing ways to make it even more accessible. But typically I don't brag, but I am really happy with this.
Well, as well you should be, because it's glorious. What is...
Thank you.
If you were to, I don't know if there's a magic number, the top 3 tips, the top 5 tips. What are the tips that you would give to a brand to tell a better story?
I'll give you the number one, and this is the absolute biggest thing that would benefit any brand, is in so many ways, you don't own the brand. Coca-Cola found out when they did New Coke that you don't tell customers what to buy, and you don't change something that they love without their permission. When you are telling the story of your brand, in fact, it is you need to be telling a love letter to your customers. That is, you have to geek out on the same stuff they geek out on. You've got to have that in common. Yeah. When one of the best things Nike has done in their brand, I can't speak for their actions outside of their branding, but I will say that in their branding, one thing that they do magnificently is they hardly ever talk about their products. Very seldom do they mention any kind of feature. What they do instead is they celebrate the spectacular wonderfulness of sports and what it does for you.
Yeah.
Like, for example, one of their commercials was called If You Let Me Play. And it was about the benefit of sports to young girls, that if what happens to them if they play organized girls' sports, and how they have much healthier mental health. They're healthier physically. They are happier with each other. They stand up for each other more, and they have better grades, and so on and so on. That's what Nike decides to talk about. And in doing so, it makes me feel good about sports too. And I'm super happy that you, Nike, were the ambassador of this information. Now it makes me like you as a fellow lover of sports. And then Procter & Gamble did this magnificent ad in the 2014 Sochi Olympics, and they subsequently have done a lot of ads like this, essentially that are nothing more than a love letter to mothers, because mothers use their products. And they want to know to those mothers, those customers out there, I see you, I notice you, I know what's important to you, and I would never do anything to upset you or make you, like, to rip you off. Every time I produce anything, it's the best I can do at a decent price. And because they express themselves as their affection for their customers are willing to pay just a little bit more. They're going to vote for that brand that sees them.
That's brilliant. You probably remember one of the very first print ads that Nike ever did was There Is No Finish Line. And I don't know if you can imagine this, but it was just that, wide shot. Maybe it's a lake with a little bit of forest. There's a lone runner running. You can't tell if it's a man or a woman beside the shore. And that's all it says. There is no finish line, Nike. That's it.
They did a version of that on TV that was called, I think it was called Find Your Greatness. And it features this very heavy set young guy running at dawn. And all he's doing, the entire commercial, is just running towards the camera from a distance on some Kansas wheat field or Kansas cornfield road. And Jude Law provided the voiceover for that. And he's essentially saying in the voiceover, just the fact that you're out here trying is a victory on its own. But you don't have to be Michael Jordan to make it worth the effort. Greatness is something that you pursue. You are great because you are in pursuit of it, not because you've achieved it. And again, what Nike is doing is sending a love letter to all those people in the gym and on the road and cycling and hiking. It's saying just the fact that you're out here is the triumph, and you know what? Paradoxically, it's also it's a magnificent statement on any creative activity, like writing. Just being at the typewriter, and yes, you ground out one more sentence, you are already winning because you are in the process, and the process is the victory. And that's what does Nike do when it goes out and advertises? It improves the commons. It improves the neighborhood. You might as well be planting a tree. And I can tell you that we need messages like that and brands like that we like to hear from, because the programming is so dim-witted and anger-inducing. At least the advertising is, well, for the most part, well-meaning. But you and I both know you can cite case after case of somebody who's an assault to the commons.
Absolutely. What's the one thing you haven't done yet that you really want to do?
I've been invited by a lot of people across the country, just ordinary, regular old folks like me, that have seen my videos and have said, "Hey, if you're ever in Terre Haute, I'd love to buy a coffee or buy a beer." And it really is something that I definitely want to do. I would have done it by now, if it weren't for the fact that I have to keep the lights on at the house. But that I really, really want to just jump in a car and head east and start taking people up on that invitation. Because I've got it almost across the country. Like, I know I've got them in Arizona and New Mexico and Texas. I got a lot in Texas for whatever reason, Fort Worth especially. And and some in Houston and New Orleans. And, I want to just basically drive the circumference of the country, taking people up on that offer, because I have a feeling it will reinforce this instinct that I have that people are actually pretty cool. And that we've got, and then I'm also hoping that maybe some stories come out of that. But that's what I'd really like to do if I had my druthers.
Amazing. And as you swing by Montana, just kick up into Calgary, and then
I got friends in Sheridan, Wyoming. It's pretty close. It's pretty close.
Right on. Oh, man. Neal, I honestly could talk to you forever, and I can't thank you enough for finding the time to do this.
That is my pleasure, Michael. It's been a lot of fun. And you have my ultimate respect for having done improv. That is balls of steel.
Not well.
Doesn't matter.
Balls of steel.
Doesn't matter that it's not well.
Yeah.
You did it. That's, in the words of Nike, it's the attempt that matters.
Yeah, we say at the beginning of many shows, take a big deep breath in and lower your expectations.
Yeah, improv, the ultimate.
Thanks, Neal.
You betcha.
Thank you so much for listening. I've been your host, Michael Dargie, and this has been the RebelRebel Podcast. It's a podcast for creative rebels and entrepreneurs all over the world. And hey, if you're a rebel or you know a rebel, why don't you head on over to the RebelRebelPodcast.com and fill out our guest request form. We'll get back to you within 24 hours, and maybe we can share your story with the world. Don't forget to like, share, or subscribe wherever you get your favorite podcasts. And thanks so much for listening. Until next time.